Okay, I'm gonna need some tea for this one. Alright, I'm committing a grave crime having a breakfast tea when it's, 5 o'clock, so... Okay, see this person here, your fucking nightmare. Well, okay, I don't know about you, but you only got like 2 followers. Woo! I mean, it's not like I have a lot, but I got more than that. So, okay, we gotta scroll to. Oh, here we go, right here. This is the first thing I said, right? Perhaps you do not understand that assets are not income, and that one should think of them in terms of wages, because wages are different. Because a wage fundamentally is you exchanging working time for money, while as a salary is exchanging your general services for the use of a company, which is why you don't necessarily have a fixed amount of hours. I mean, in the contract you might have to work a certain number of hours, but this is why they can call you, in at a certain time at night and just be like, oh yeah, I need you in the office because it's an emergency. Like you are committed to this company. It's a different level of commitment, and you're not explicitly exchanging your time, but exchanging your expertise, which is a bit different, right? And because you have a unique skill set, and so therefore you're paid differently. Like they want you on board in a more permanent fashion, while a wage is more like, basically nearly anyone could do this. This is not hard skill. We just need somebody doing it, and so we shall pay you for compensation of your time. And then there is the creation of, like an actual asset, which is creating an asset is fundamentally different, right? And this is what I was trying to say. There's a fundamental difference between creating a valuable company versus exchanging money and time into money. He didn't make $70 billion. His company just increased in value, which is correct. Like at the end of the day, I think what the real issue is people don't understand what companies do. Like, what does a corporation do? But before we do that, I'll just read the rest of what ended up happening. It's like they responded with, assets are still part of your income. Otherwise, the IRS wouldn't want to know about my assets, eh? Not exactly. So they are taxable, but they're not income. They're actually taxed under a completely different category. And so under U.S. law, assets are not taxed, and even when they are taxed, they're taxed not under income as a different thing as capital gains tax, and it's for a reason, because the gains aren't realized. And so unless they're transferred to somebody with a gift or a death, or you sell them, then they're not going to be taxed because the profits have not come into being. Income generally implies, something's coming into your possession. That's why we call it income. But an asset is something you've already had come into your possession, which just increased dramatically in value. That's not taxable unless you sell it, right? Because you haven't liquidated it yet. Now we do have death tax, which is a little bit controversial because people will transfer that object to the person, but that person doesn't have the cash to pay the tax on it, and so usually then they have to go and sell it even if they don't want to. A little bit unfortunate. Death taxes are a little bit ethically ambiguous. Not really so sure about those ones. Gift taxes, those are more to avoid like corruption issues, but I don't know. It's still... there's pros and cons to these things. And then the final response was right here. And so you tax the company, and companies are people, all right? And this is like the idea of like, they dislike the idea that corporations are somehow companies, people, sorry. And they have to pay taxes. If the whole ass corporation has rights, then they need to be taxed. Also, let's not even start with tax shelters. Well, I'm not really sure what tax shelters comes into this, but it's more along the lines of the reason why corporations have legal carve-outs for them is to prevent, to make a place where innovation can occur. So beforehand, if you wanted to invest in a highly risky project, the people that were being lent money would be on the line for that to some degree. Now, I actually was looking into the history of this a month ago, back when I had a little more time, and the time it takes to read through all this is quite a lot, because it turns out the history of how corporate law got invented is actually very long and nuanced. But generally speaking, the primary idea is that as it turns out, if you want to increase standard of living, you need to create brilliant things, and these things have a high chance of failure. And so how do you fund them? Well, you can't just fund them by just one rich guy. You need to fund them with lots. And it's also high risk, so there's a high chance they're going to lose money. So who's going to want to start the project? Who's going to want to manage it if they're on the line for these debts? So you need to have a special legal carve-out in terms of what is liable in terms of who owes things. Like if the company goes under, does that mean the management goes to prison? Are they like put into like some indentured servitude for life? Do they go to debtor's prison? What are these things? And these were the questions that were slowly got answered over time. And you have to also realize that at the end of the day, companies are far more useful than you just exchanging your time into money. Like if you're just flipping burgers all day, which I've done before, and I still do, and I do other things like bartending and managing, supervising little children. Like these are not hard jobs explicitly. So, and to do them well, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of skill. There's lots of people that can do these jobs, and so as a result, I'm just paid for my time. Now I might get tips and other things depending on like if you're closer to sales. This is why waiters get tips. Probably the chefs should also share in the profits. Because especially like if they're doing a good job with their food quality, I think they should be compensated for that. This is the reason why sales get commissions, because of how integral to the business they are. So you want the incentives of the people working for the corporation to be in line with the people that funded the operation. And so this is why, like, as you get in higher management, inevitably what occurs is the management is compensated for doing well with options in their payments as a bonus, right? And so that way they get options, they get to pay for they pay the fee for the option. Now they own the stock, which is at a reduced price, and then afterwards, now when the stock goes up, they also make more money on top of that, plus they'll get even more bonuses if they do even better. And so that way the incentives are aligned. This is the general issues that most people don't understand. That at the end of the day, what a company is supposed to do is it is essentially like a magical box that takes in raw material and then pops out an end product that solves some problem for people in the world. And this is hard to do. Like to make economies of scale is hard.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of those things people don't even realize is the manufacturing out here. That's kind of one of those things you harp on so much, is how that's so important. And that's in the long scheme the hardest part of all this. It's just manufacturing.
Generally, manufacturing is underrated and design is overrated. So people generally think that this eureka moment of like you come up with this idea and that's it. Now it's good. But the design like this, literally 1,000%, maybe 10,000% more work that goes into the production system than the thing itself. So like how much effort we put into, say, designing Raptor versus designing a manufacturing system, it's 10 to 100 times more effort to design a manufacturing system than the engine.
Oh, even with Raptor?
Oh yeah, absolutely, especially with Raptor. All of our basically the amount of effort that goes into the design rounds down to zero.
And like you look at like a factory, for instance, and the primary difference is like, look at the prototyping costs, like how much money it costs to make the first iteration of a product versus to make a factory that then makes the product. And the factories are these brilliantly constructed machines. And if you ignore the cost to build the factory, which actually is the important part, you realize that the cost per like making a machine trends towards the cost of the raw materials. And this is the magic of making a factory. Is a factory will take in your raw inputs and make a highly complex and highly valuable end product. And this is hard to do. This is extremely complicated. And not only that, it takes billions of dollars to get done. So, you can always look at the car factory as an example. Or you can look at there's a company that produces the machines that build silicon chips, microprocessors. And it costs about $50 billion to build one of these machines in 10 years of development. And then once you're done, you got a machine that can turn $1,000 piece of silicon into, it's like an $80 piece of silicon into like something that's like, $10,000 to $30,000. And so this is a pretty cool machine that's able to 30x the value of like a hunk of metal, essentially. That's highly valuable. And so, this is how you can justify the cost and development of these complex machines, which are essentially just infrastructure. You can think of them like a bridge. They bridge the gap. Like I have a bridge right outside my house here. If we didn't have the bridge, we'd have to, sail across every single time we wanted to go from effectively I live on an island, okay, and to get to the mainland I would have to swim across. This is highly inconvenient. It takes lots of time. I get wet. So what do? We build a bridge, right? I go across the bridge. Now it takes me 5 minutes to cross the bridge. Don't get wet. It's super easy. But the difference is that the bridge, of course, takes 2 years to build. I'm not sure how much they spent on it. I'll probably put it on the screen. And the bridge has lasted for almost 70 years now, which is kind of cool, right? That's good. That's a good cost. That's a good return on investment there. But it also has raised the standard of living, because now that we have the bridge, it just kind of sits there. We just have to do maintenance cost. But the rewards for using it outweigh the cost of repairing it, and so it was justified to build the bridge. And it's the same thing with companies. And at the end of the day, being allowed to sell and buy stock is important, because if you don't have this, people can't get out. They don't have the terminal value. If you only have the income of a company, then you will not ever have the ability to evaluate, like, you won't be able to get investment as easily. Like if you want to expand the business, right? You need to be able to buy and sell shares in this corporation. And on top of that, you want to be able to get out of a business if it's done, right? Like if the business is basically met its peak, it's expanded as much as it can, and they're running out of creative ideas to go further, and they're just going to, this is the life cycle of businesses, is businesses at a certain point just end up kind of just sitting there. They will sit there and do the thing that they were built to do. Management doesn't have to be creative. People come in there, they do their job, they take in whatever materials, they make their whatever product, and over time, usually the industry consolidates into 4, 5 businesses, and their profit margins are 4% a year, right? This is the peak of capitalism, when you have an industry like the airlines, which the airlines have optimized themselves so well that they don't even make money on the actual air flights anymore. They make money, their actual profits effectively come from selling travel miles to the credit card companies, which that's peak optimization there, when they're effectively just losing money on air travel, but yet they still provide the service. That's a peak industry right there. You can look at other things like sugar production, steel production, car manufacturing, except Tesla is changing that up with electric cars. But beforehand, their operations were some years they'd make 20%, and then they would operate for 3 years with negative 9%, right? This is they would have very highly cyclical business models, and it wouldn't always be the same car company that'd be winning out. And so on average, the industry over annualized over multiple decades was making 4 to 6%. And this is what happens after the creative industry, the creative mind goes away. It goes away because the industry's met its peak. There's nothing to solve anymore, and so you go away. So what you want is these creative people, which are very, very rare, that are also highly talented at organizing other brilliant people, and you want them to be able to sell their stake, so that way other people can get on in this, because effectively the way that people evaluate stocks is based on a spit out ratio. It's PE ratio. So you're okay, I built this magical little box. We don't know how long it'll live. Its life expectancy is unknown, guys. Usually it's 40 years. But effectively, we know that the profits will be about this much. So I'm not going to sell it for less than 1 year's profit share that I get. I'm going to sell it for a certain ratio of this. So it's how much of that ratio? Most companies that are mature and old and very reliable, it's about a 15-10 years ratio. Companies that are still very growing, they'll sell for 1,000 or even more if they're a tech company, because they know that the end profits by the time they hit maturity will be significantly higher than they currently are. And so as a result, it just at least the people buying them think it's justified to buy them at such a high price. So, and this is basically to explain that corporations are very well designed to incentivize the people that are able to actually build the infrastructure that makes the modern world, and then allows those people to leave those companies, carry the capital that they've created, the valuation, like the fact that they created a product, let's say Steve Jobs creates the iPhone, is not as valuable as him making the business that creates the product. This is very important, and so that's a completely different thing, and that actually is worth billions of dollars. And this is when you realize that at the end of the day, once you get past a certain amount of income, the money that we're talking about here is not in terms of like what I can buy. It is in terms of what it can produce, right? And so this is talking about land or infrastructure of any kind, be it a business or a road or a bridge. And this is fundamentally what drives society forward. And so when you look at these wealthy people, you have to understand that their wealth is not in, it's not like you can buy $70 billion worth of Taco Bell. There's not enough tacos on the planet to put that much wealth into. Wealth effectively ends up becoming control of the means of production, right? And these things should be in the hands of the people who know how to build them, know how to make them better, and also know how to make new ones, right? And so these, it's a very rare set of people that can do this. It's like almost nobody can. And you want a way for them to get out of businesses that are, not there anymore, that don't have any way upwards, and you want people to be able to make new ones. And so this is where old capital gets put into new ideas, and most of them fail. But if you're like, oh well, we should tax the corporations, well, here's the thing. Actually, it makes more sense to just remove corporate tax, because at the end of the day, this is something people don't get, is that the profits of a corporation either will go to the shareholders or they'll be reinvested in the business. And you don't want to impede either of these because, for one, the shareholders will be able to avoid tax less. It's counted as income tax when it's dividend tax, which actually is a lot, which is taxed at a higher rate. And not only is it taxed at a higher rate, their proportion of the income's less, and so therefore they'll spend less on avoiding taxes, right? Avoidance of tax is a very real thing. If a corporation is going to be taxed $300 million, it's worth it for them to spend $100 million, so that way they only effectively, spend, I don't know, as long as they can reduce their taxes by however much they spent on taxes at the very least, then it is worth it to them. And they'll spend that money, and so the government effectively takes in less revenue. However, if you're getting dividends, which is a much smaller portion, as an individual, you're going to spend way less time trying to avoid your taxes. I mean, you'll do it to some degree legally, as much as you can, but it'll be a lot less. And not to mention it's the higher rate. And so at the end of the day, the government will take in more revenue if you just only tax it from the dividends. Now you're like, well, I'm not taxing. What about the money that's reinvested in the company? Well, that's fine, because it allows companies to then use their capital more effectively, the profits, the proceeds they just took in, to then reinvest in the business to expand it. Because what you want at the end of the day is for the best companies to be able to innovate as quickly as possible. So that way you can raise the standard of living, because this is effectively what raises standard of living. You can raise the total amount of production that individuals can do by making them more productive with infrastructure that directly affects their labor. Or you can affect the products that people have available to, right? And these two dynamics cause, typically over time, you'll find that wages do go up. Especially if you don't have an inflationary system, which is why I advocate for an appreciating currency, which is why I'm a Bitcoiner. But you look for, wages go up, salaries go up, but the rate of innovation, the rate of standard of living, goes up far faster than the total amount of money you make going up. And this is actually what gets your exponential growth in standard of living, is the things you have access to. Like, would you like to be a king in 1907, or would you like to be, like an average Joe in 2023? And the answer is that you would rather be an average Joe in 2023, because you have access to things that no king during that time could have ever had. Because even if you're rich, you can't buy it because it doesn't exist. So making access to new things is far more important than effectively merely, promoting equality. I don't know what else you would want to promote. You want to promote access to things. You want to create new stuff. And the way you do that is hard. It's complicated. And corporations they were not designed by one person overnight. They literally evolved over almost 3 centuries into what they are now. and some corporate law is MacGyvered and not effective, but on a whole, they make lots of sense. And so you say, Jeff Bezos doesn't deserve that $78 billion, but I say, well, without him, you don't have effectively the everything store, which is location is your house. That's a pretty important invention, and it has provided a very large amount of improvement in standard of living for Americans at the very least, and in Europe quite a lot. And maybe he should be worth 200 some billion dollars. He's probably, in terms of the total amount of wealth he's probably created a lot more than just 250 billion. He's probably created trillions. Steve Jobs died with a net worth of $7 billion, yet he created an industry that's worth about $3 trillion. So, at the end of the day, usually they actually don't get a perfect 1-to-1 ratio of what they've created versus what they get paid. All right, I think we'll leave it there.